to Breakthrough for Business Success. And today we're talking about something that is very close to my heart because I started in podcasting back when it was in its infancy and have been in the speaking industry for over 40 years. So that this show is dedicated to helping entrepreneurs build, grow, and scale a successful business while creating life of purpose, freedom, and impact. I'm your host, Davida Shensky, entrepreneur, speaker, coach, and founder of Career Performance Institute. Each week, we explore the strategies, mindset shifts, and proven success principles that help entrepreneurs overcome obstacles, seize opportunities, and achieve meaningful results. Whether you're launching your first business growth, your brand, increasing your income, or scaling to the next level, you'll find practical insights and actionable solutions that you can implement immediately through expert interviews, success stories, business strategies, marketing tips, leadership lessons, and personal development insights. You'll gain the knowledge and confidence needed to move forward with clarity and purpose. Success doesn't happen by chance. It happens when vision meets action, persistence meets opportunity, and challenges become stepping stones to growth. So get ready to think bigger, to take smarter action, and create the business and life that you deserve. So welcome to Breakthrough to Business Success, helping entrepreneurs build, grow, and scale. And in today's episode, what we're going to be doing is talking about much more than speaking. It's about authority. It's about influence. It's about visibility. And ultimately, it's about building a business that people know, trust, and want to buy from. If you've ever wondered whether it's too late to launch a podcast, too late to become a speaker, too late to build a personal brand, or too late to establish yourself as an expert, I want to answer that question right now. No. In fact, I believe we're living through one of the greatest opportunities entrepreneurs have ever had. Think about it for a moment. Just 20 or 30 years ago, building a national reputation required enormous resources. You often needed to be a publisher willing to invest in your book. You needed media exposure. You needed connections with influential people. You needed significant marketing dollars, and in many cases, you needed permission from someone else before your message could ever reach a large audience. Today, that's no longer true. Every one of us carries a broadcasting studio in our pocket with a smartphone, a microphone, and an internet connection. You can reach people around the world. That's extraordinary shift. But here's the interesting part. Technology alone doesn't create authority. Opportunity alone doesn't create success. What creates success is knowing how to use these tools strategically. And in today's episode, it's about understanding how we arrived at this moment, and more importantly, how you can take advantage of it. I'm going to talk about this because when I talk about a specific industry, it's because I know the most of that it. I attended National Speakers Association meetings. I was a member of Toastmasters, and I saw how they work back 40 years ago, and it's been a tremendous change, and that change has allowed more people to be far more successful than you were capable of doing in the past. Authority has changed forever. Let's begin with a simple question. When you hear the word authority, what comes to mind? For some people, authority means credentials, degrees, awards, certifications. For others, authority means experience, years in business, clients served, revenue earned, books written, speaking engagements. All of these things matter, but authority has changed dramatically over the past 50 years. Today, authority is built through visibility. People trust those they consistently see. They follow people who continue showing up with valuable insights. They listen to people who educate before they sell. That's why content has become one of the greatest business assets you can create. Every podcast episode, every article, every presentation, every interview, every social media post, every video, and another opportunity to build trust. And trust is what transforms strangers into followers, followers into customers, customers into loyal advocates, and advocates into people who gladly recommend your business to others. As someone who has spent decades helping people build careers, businesses, and confidence, I've watched these changes unfold firsthand. I've seen incredibly talented people hesitate because they believed they weren't ready, and this is a personal reflection. Maybe you felt that way too. You tell yourself you'll launch the podcast once you know more. You'll start speaking after you gain more confidence. You'll write that book when you have more experience. You'll begin creating content when everything is perfect. But perfection is one of the biggest obstacles to progress. The entrepreneurs who succeed aren't necessarily the smartest. They aren't always the talented. They're the ones who consistently take action. Every successful business begins with one decision, one conversation, one client, one presentation, one episode, one opportunity. Small actions repeated consistently become extraordinary results. Why this episode matters. Today's episode isn't simply about the history of speaking. It's really about understanding how authority has evolved. Because once you understand where we've been, you'll recognize where we're going. And if you understand where we're going, you'll position yourself ahead of the curve instead of chasing it. Over the next several segments, we're going to explore how professional speaking evolved, why books once ruled the business world, how the internet disrupted everything, why podcasting has become one of the most powerful authority building tools available, how the pandemic accelerated digital transformation, and finally, what every entrepreneur needs to do today to build a thriving business in what I call the creator authority era. By the end of this episode, I want you to walk away with more than inspiration. I want you to leave with clarity, confidence, and a practical roadmap that you can begin implementing immediately because your expertise deserves an audience. Your story deserves to be heard, and your business deserves the visibility that comes from consistently sharing your knowledge. So let's travel back more than 50 years to a time when professional speaking looked very different than it does today. And that's where our story begins. The birth of the professional speaking. To understand why today is such an incredible time to build your authority, we first have to appreciate what the professional speaking industry looked like more than 50 years ago. Believe it or not, there was a time when professional speaking wasn't even considered a profession at all. People certainly gave speeches. Business leaders addressed employees. Politicians campaigned. Teachers lectured. Ministers preached. Motivational speakers inspired audiences. But there wasn't a recognized career path for someone whose primary profession was speaking. There was no accepted standards, no formal code of ethics, and a very few opportunities for speakers to learn from one another. Most successful speakers figured things out on their own, relying on trial and error to build their careers. And that changed in 1973. A vision that changed an industry. In Phoenix, Arizona, a speaker named Cavett Robert invited a small group of professional speakers together with one goal in mind: elevate speaking from a side activity into a respected profession. Cavett Robert believed that speakers should do more than entertain. They should educate, inspire, and make a lasting impact. He also believed that speakers needed a community where they could learn, support one another, and raise the standards of the profession. That meeting led to the creation of the National Speakers Association, often referred to by simply NSA. At the first, it was relatively small, but over time, it became the leading professional association for speakers, trainers, authors, consultants, and experts. For the first time, people who made their living speaking had a place to learn best practices, improve their craft, and network with others who shared the same goals. It wasn't about getting more speaking engagements. It was about professionalism, ethics, preparation, and delivering real value to audiences. And they had 8 platform skills that were very much a part of building your professional accreditation. So now we're going to talk about building credibility as a professional speaker. One of the most significant developments that came out of the National Speakers Association was the Certified Speaking Professional, or the CSP designation. Earning a CSP wasn't easy. It required years of paid speaking experience, documented presentations, client recommendations, and a demonstrated commitment to excellence. The designation became a symbol of credibility. If an event planner saw these 3 letters after your name, they knew you had experience. They knew you met rigorous standards, and they knew that you had invested in becoming an exceptional at your craft. Today, certifications still matter in professions, but back then the CSP represented something even larger. It represented trust, and trust has always been one of the most valuable currencies in business. Now, what we're going to do is talk about the era of the gatekeeper, because this is how professional speakers got on the circuit, got booked, and made the money. You all have heard of Zig Ziglar. You all heard of Jim Rohn. You all heard of Brian Tracy. They all came out of this era of speaking. Now, here's where things get interesting. Even though professional speaking was becoming more respected, there were still significant barriers to success. If you wanted to speak at major conferences, corporate events, or association meetings, you usually couldn't simply call it an event organizer and introduce yourself. Instead, there were gatekeepers. One of the biggest gatekeeper was the Speakers Bureau. And think of the Speakers Bureau as a talent agency for professional speakers. Organizations looking for keynote speakers would contact a bureau and describe what they needed. The bureau would then recommend speakers from its roster. If you weren't represented by a bureau, your chances of speaking on the largest stages were much smaller. These bureaus became incredibly influential because they controlled access to many of the most prestigious speaking opportunities, and naturally, everyone wanted to be represented. So what it took to be booked. So how did someone convince the Speakers Bureau to represent them? It wasn't enough to say, I'm passionate. It wasn't enough to say, I know my subject. You needed proof. And that proof often came in the form of a published book. Books became more than products. They became business cards. They demonstrated expertise. They showed commitment. They gave event planners something tangible they could review before hiring a speaker. And in many ways, your book served as your resume. If you had written a respected book, you immediately stood out from countless other speakers. Why books mattered so much? Imagine yourself an event planner in the 1980s. You have hundreds of potential speakers to choose from. How do you decide? There are no podcasts. There is no YouTube channels. There is no LinkedIn profiles. There's no Instagram Reels. No TikTok videos. No webinars. No online communities. Very little digital content existed. A book was often the only substantial piece of work that demonstrated someone's expertise. It showed that they had invested the time to organize their ideas. It gave planners confidence that the speaker could deliver meaningful content. It also created another revenue opportunity. After presentations, speakers often sold books at the back of the room. These books and sales generated additional income while reinforcing the speaker's authority. Many successful speaking businesses were built on this model. Now, I also want to talk about this. There was a speaker circuit because there were agencies that sold training and traveled around, and they would hire speakers to become part of their system. And how that worked was that you would travel to different cities. You would leave on Sunday, rather, you would fly out on Sunday to the first city. You would do your presentation. You were only guaranteed $250 a day. Then you earned a percentage off of the back of the room sales, and those could be books, video, tape programs, anything that you sold. And how it worked back then was you would fly into the city, you would go to the room where the meeting was being held, and you would set up and make sure your mic was working. You would make sure that everything was set up in the back of the room. Then you would be there to greet the attendees. Then you would conduct your 8-hour session. Then at the end of the session, you would break it down. You would make sure that whatever was left over would be sent back to the trading company, and then you would eat dinner, get in your car, and travel to the next city to do this again. And you did that 5 days a week, and you earned $250 a day guaranteed. But when you considered that you would probably be up at 6 in the morning and not get to your next city to 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and when you considered all of those hours, $250 and was not a lot of money per hour to be making, and you had to basically add money to it through back of the room sales on a daily basis. And then on Friday, and every day you would get in your car and travel to the next city from Monday to Friday. And then on Friday, you would fly home, and on Saturday, you would have your day off. And then on Sunday, usually you would fly out again. And you were only guaranteed 10 to 15 days a month, but it really ended up being more like you had very little time at home. So now, with the technology, people do the same thing from home, and in the end, you can earn far more money because you've done a lot more. And in my case, I not only and how I got into podcasting back in 2006 was I needed a way to be able to have an audio program, because unless you had money up front to start this business, it was very difficult to break into it. So here's lessons for today's entrepreneurs. Now, you might be wondering, what does all this history have to do with building my business today? Actually, quite a bit. The tools have changed. The principles haven't. 50 years ago, people trusted speakers who demonstrated expertise. Today, people still trust experts. The difference is how we demonstrate that expertise. And instead of only writing books, we create podcasts. Instead of waiting to be invited onto the stage, we host webinars. Instead of hoping for media interviews, we publish videos. Instead of relying on someone else's audience, we build our own communities. The platforms have changed. The mission hasn't. Your goal is still to educate, solve problems, build trust, and create meaningful relationships with the people you serve. So here's your first reflection. As you're listening to today, I want you to think about your own business. If someone discovered you for the very first time, what evidence would they find that demonstrates your expertise? Would they find educational content? Would they find a podcast, helpful articles, videos, case studies, testimonials? Or would they simply find a website describing what you do? Authority isn't something you claim. It's something that people experience through the value that you consistently provide. And that's an important distinction. The entrepreneurs who become recognized leaders aren't constantly telling people they're experts. They're demonstrating it every single week through the content that they create and the problems they solve. So, let's look at what happened when books ruled the speaking industry. But once the industry became more organized, another question emerged. How did someone become recognized as an expert? Today, many people would answer that question by saying, start a podcast, build a YouTube channel, or create valuable content online. But for decades, there was only one answer: write a book. The book was more than a book. Think back to a time before Google, before YouTube, before social media, before online reviews. If someone wanted to evaluate your expertise, they couldn't search your name and watch 50 videos. They couldn't listen to your podcast on the drive home. They couldn't browse your LinkedIn profile or visit your website. The only substantial evidence of your knowledge was often a published book. A book wasn't simply something you sold. It was proof that you had organized your thinking, developed original ideas, and invested the time to create something that could educate others. It immediately elevated your credibility. When someone handed you their book, they weren't just handing you pages filled with words. They were handing you a business card, a marketing tool, a sales brochure, and credibility builder all in one. That's why so many successful speakers became authors. Not because they expected to become best-selling novelists, but because they understood that a book opened doors. The traditional path to success. If you wanted to build a national speaking career, the formula was remarkably consistent. First, develop expertise in a specific area. Second, write a book around your expertise. Third, begin speaking at smaller events to build experience and testimonials. Fourth, attract the attention of a speakers bureau. Fifth, land larger conferences and corporate engagements. Finally, sell books and programs from the back of the room. It was a proven model. Many well-known speakers built remarkable careers following this exact path. The process required patience. It required persistence. And perhaps, most importantly, it required someone else to give you an opportunity. And when you think about the speaking profession in the past, it took many years before you got to the point of making $25,000 or $30,000 for a keynote speech. Today, it takes far less time, and that's because you're basically producing all of your content online, whether it's a course, whether it's a challenge, whether it's a mastermind group. All of these things you earn money off of, but you've built it up and you've trained your time, and it helps you to scale faster than the speakers of the past. The gatekeepers controlled the opportunity. Let's pause here for a moment, because this is where one of the biggest differences between them then and now become obvious. Years ago, access was controlled by the gatekeepers. Publishers decided whose book would reach bookstores. Speakers bureaus decided which experts would be presented to meeting planners. Television producers decided who would appear on national programs. Magazine editors decided whose stories deserved to be printed. If those gatekeepers said no, your message often stopped there. That didn't mean talented people weren't out there. It simply meant that many talented people never had the opportunity to be seen. Imagine how many incredible ideas never reached the public because someone behind the desk decided they weren't commercially viable. Fortunately, history was about to change. And for me, I can take it back then. You had to have the money to put into writing the book, getting in front of the Speakers Bureau, getting in front of the media. And unless you had the contacts and the money, you were pretty much basically locked out the door. And considering the fact that even though I had a message to give because I have a disability and I didn't look the role of what they wanted, that also became a barrier. And that's how I got into podcasting to begin with, because I wasn't given the opportunities to really prove myself any other way. What entrepreneurs can learn, even though a business landscape has evolved dramatically, there are valuable lessons from the era that still apply today. The first lesson is this: expertise matters. People are looking for guidance from individuals who have invested time learning their craft. Whether you're teaching leadership, marketing, health, finance, coaching, technology, or entrepreneurship, people want to know that you've done the work. The second lesson is consistency. Writing a book takes discipline. It requires commitment over a long period of time. That same discipline is required to build a successful business today. Whether you're recording weekly podcast episodes, publishing articles, creating videos, or speaking regularly, consistency is what builds momentum. And the third lesson is positioning. The most successful speakers weren't trying to be experts on everything. They became known for solving one particular problem exceptionally well. When people thought about leadership or sales or customer service or motivation, specific names immediately came to mind. And that's the power of positioning. Becoming known for something. One of the biggest mistakes entrepreneurs make is trying to appeal to everyone. They describe themselves as using broad terms like business coach, consultant, speaker, or trainer. But those words don't tell people what transformation you actually provide. Instead, ask yourself this question: when people hear my name, what do I want them to immediately associate me with? Do you help entrepreneurs launch profitable businesses? Do you help nonprofit leaders raise more funding? Do you help people with disabilities build successful businesses? Do you help professionals become confident public speakers? The clearer your answer, the stronger your authority becomes. People remember specialists. They recommend specialists. They hire specialists. The power of the intellectual property. Books represented something much larger than the printed page. They represented intellectual property. Your ideas became assets. Today, intellectual property has expanded to beyond books. Your podcast episodes become intellectual property. Your online courses become intellectual property. Your keynote presentations become intellectual property. Your workshops, templates, coaching frameworks, assessments, and digital resources all become assets that continue creating valuable long after you develop them. That's one of the greatest opportunities entrepreneurs have today. You're no longer limited to a single product. You can build an entire ecosystem around your expertise. Imagine reporting one podcast. That episode can become a blog article, a LinkedIn post, several social media clips, an email newsletter, a YouTube video, a workshop, even a chapter in your future book. That's working smarter, not simply harder. And that's how you're creating multiple streams of income within one product and one business. Why this matters today. Here's something I want every listener to remember. The goal has never been simply to write a book. The goal has always been to become known. Years ago, books were the fastest path. Today, they're one of many paths. Authority isn't tied to one format anymore. It's tied to your ability to consistently help people solve meaningful problems, whether you choose books, speaking, podcasting, video, or all of the above. Your mission remains the same. Serve first, educate generously, build trust consistently. When you do that, opportunities naturally begin to multiply. The question for you, let me leave you with a question before we move on. If someone searched for your name today, what would they find? Would they discover valuable content that demonstrates your expertise? Would they see evidence that you're actively serving your audience? Would they immediately understand the problem you solve? Or would they have to guess your online presence is becoming your first impression? And first impressions matter. So now, let's talk about how the internet broke the gatekeepers, because this is very, very important. And this is telling you how we transition into what the industry has become today and how it has opened the doors for people who had the ability but never the opportunity to go become successful in their industry. So far, we've explored how professional speaking became a respected profession and why books were once considered the ultimate symbol of expertise. But every industry eventually experiences a turning point, a moment when the old rules stop working and the entirely new opportunity emerge for the speaking industry and really for every entrepreneur. That turning point was the internet. Looking back now, it's easy to take for granted how much our world has changed. But if you lived through the transition, you know it was nothing short of revolutionary. The internet didn't just change how we communicated, it changed who had the opportunity to be heard. Before the internet, let's imagine that you're an expert in 1990. You spent your years developing your knowledge. You helped clients achieve outstanding results. You know your material inside out. But how do you get people to notice you? Your options were limited. You might send direct mail to prospective clients. You might advertise in industry magazines. You might attend networking events. You might speak at local meetings hoping someone in the audience would recommend you. Maybe, if you were fortunate, you'd be interviewed by a local newspaper or appear on a radio show. Every opportunity depended on someone else opening the door. It was slow, it was expensive, and it often took years to build a national reputation. Many outstanding experts never received the recognition they deserved, not because they lacked talent, but because they lacked access. And yes, during the Olympics in Atlanta and during the Paralympics, I was interviewed because of my expertise on disability issues and being a disability rights advocate. But it didn't mean I was getting access to getting booked as a speaker. That really, the internet is what opened the doors to me and gave me the opportunities to become known in my industry, because I did not have the opportunity to market myself. Because when you build your business offline, you had to have at least $500,000 just to pay for things to get going and to pay to get that book published. Today, when you do everything on the internet and you build your website and you build your connections through YouTube, you do not have to have that kind of money coming in or upfront money. Everything changed as the internet became more widely available. Entrepreneurs suddenly had something previous generations never had: a direct connection to their audience. You no longer had to wait for a magazine editor to publish your article, and that usually happened until 3 months. They could interview you, then by the time that got published, it was 3 months later. You could publish it yourself. You didn't need permission from a television producer to share your expertise. You could upload a video. You didn't need to rent a conference room to teach a class. You could deliver it online. For the first time in history, anyone with valuable knowledge had the ability to build an audience without relying on traditional gatekeepers. That shift completely transformed business. The rise of blogging. Before social media became dominant, blogs played a major role in establishing authority. Entrepreneurs began writing articles that answered common questions, solved everyday problems, and educated potential customers. These articles remained online, continuing to attract readers months after month and year after year. Think about the significance of that. Instead of introducing yourself to one project at a networking event, you can help thousands of people through a well-written article. People who had never met you began to trust you because of your content demonstrated your expertise. Education became marketing. Teaching became selling. The best marketers weren't constantly promoting themselves. They were consistently solving problems. That principle still applies today. Then came YouTube. When YouTube launched, something remarkable happened. For the first time, entrepreneurs could communicate not just with words, but with their personalities. People could see their expressions, hear their voice, watch their demonstrations, observe your confidence. Video added a human element that printed words alone couldn't provide. Some business owners worried that they weren't polished enough. Others believed they needed expensive equipment. But audience discovered something interesting. Authenticity mattered more than perfection. People would forgive average lighting. They would overlook simple editing, but they wouldn't ignore someone who genuinely cared about helping them. That's still true today. Now, TED changed the meaning of a stage. Another major shift occurred when TED began making its talks available online. For decades, a speech reached only the people sitting in the room. Once the event ended, the presentation was over. But when TED placed talks online, something extraordinary happened. A simple presentation could reach millions of people around the world. Instead of speaking to 500 people in a conference room, you could potentially inspire 5 million. The stage became global. That changed how entrepreneurs thought about speaking. A presentation was no longer just an event. It became content. It became marketing. It became intellectual property. It became a long-term business asset. Today, every keynote has the potential to live far beyond the room where it was delivered. Social media changed the conversation. Then social media entered the picture. Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, which is now X, Instagram. Later came TikTok, Threads, and other platforms. At first, many business owners viewed social media as entertainment, but smart entrepreneurs quickly recognized something much bigger. It wasn't just a place to socialize. It was a place to educate, to build relationships, to demonstrate expertise, to stay visible. Instead of meeting someone once a year at a conference, you could remain in front of them every week. Every valuable post became another opportunity to remind people who you are, what you do, and how you help. Authority became accessible. Perhaps the greatest gift of the internet gave entrepreneurs was accessibility. Authority was no longer reserved for celebrities. It wasn't limited to best-selling authors. You didn't need to appear on national television. You simply needed to consistently show up with valuable information. Think about that. A coach working from home office could build an international business. A consultant could teach clients across multiple continents. A speaker could influence people they've never met. A nonprofit leader could inspire supporters around the world. Geography stopped being the limitation it once was, but visibility isn't enough. Here's where many entrepreneurs misunderstand today's landscape. They believe visibility automatically creates authority. It doesn't. Anyone can post content. Anyone can upload videos. Anyone can start a social media account. Authority comes from what you consistently deliver. People don't follow you because you post every day. They follow you because every time they encounter your content, they learn something valuable. Quality builds trust. Consistently reinforces trust. Results create loyalty. That's the formula. A lesson for every entrepreneur. So let me ask you something. When someone visits your website or listens to your podcast or watches one of your videos, do they leave smarter than when they arrived? Do they feel encouraged, inspired, better equipped to solve a problem? Because that's the standard we should all strive for. Our goal isn't simply to attract attention, it's to create transformation. If every interaction leaves someone feeling more confident, more informed, or more hopeful, they'll remember you. And when they need help in the future, they'll remember exactly where they found the value, the foundation for what came next. The internet opened the door. Blogs helped establish authority. YouTube humanized expert. TED expanded reach of great ideas. Social media strengthened relationships. But there is still one platform that would combine education, personality, consistency, and trust more effectively than anything before it. That platform was podcasting. And in many ways, podcasting has become the modern entrepreneur's most powerful authority building tool. Why? Because there's something uniquely personal about hearing someone's voice every single week. A podcast creates a relationship, unlike other forms of content. So, what we're going to talk about now is why podcasting changed the authority forever. Now, we've arrived at what I believe has become one of the most significant shifts in the history of personal branding and business growth. Podcasting, if someone had told you 20 years ago that millions of people would be willing to spend 30 minutes or even an hour listening to entrepreneurs, coaches, educators, and business owners, most people would have laughed. Today, that's exactly what happens every single day. And there's a reason podcasting has become such a powerful authority building platform. It creates something every successful business depends on: trust. Now we're going to talk about the early days of podcasting, and this is what's important. When podcasting first got started, it was actually called internet radio. It was Apple who coined the word podcast, and you had Blog Talk Radio, you had YouTube, you had boy, talk show. Boy, that's an old one that hasn't been around for. But you had several of them. Blog Talk Radio actually lasted the longest and really basically shut down about 2 years ago. And so it was around from the early 2000s to really into the 2020s. So let's talk about the early days of podcasting. Podcasting didn't begin with celebrities. It didn't begin with billion-dollar media companies. It began with people who simply wanted to share ideas. In the early 2000s, podcasting was still an experiment. The technology was new. The audience was small. Many people didn't even know what the word podcast meant. Recording wasn't as easy as it was today. What you had to do in the past when it was a Blog Talk Radio is you opened up the screen. You had a motherboard. But what you had to do was use your telephone and call in. You had seminars back then before you had webinars. All of it was done on the phone, but you listened to it through the internet. Many people didn't even know what the word podcast meant. Recording wasn't as easy as it is today. Equipment was more expensive. Publishing episodes required technical knowledge. Finding podcasts wasn't always simple. Yet the people who started during those early years had one thing in common. They believed their message mattered, and they were willing to share it consistently. That's an important lesson for every entrepreneur. You don't have to begin with perfect conditions. You simply have to begin. Why audio creates a different kind of connection. Think about the people you listen to regularly. Perhaps it's a business expert, a motivational speaker, a leadership coach, a financial educator, or maybe it's someone who simply inspired you to think differently. Over time, something interesting happens. You begin to feel like you know them, even if you've never met them. Why? Because you're spending time together. When someone speaks directly into your ears while you're driving to work, walking through your neighborhood, working out, cooking dinner, or traveling, their voice becomes familiar. Their stories become familiar. Their personality becomes familiar. Unlike a social media post that disappears in seconds, a podcast invites listeners to spend meaningful time with you. That's incredibly powerful. Now, before I go on, what I want to do is say something because I think this is important. Back in the day, before you had all of this technology, women who were taking care of babies or were staying at home, what did they do? They watched soap operas, and you had as many as 12 soap operas. Now you're down to 4, and those soap opera characters and actors who played those roles became known to you, that you would mob them on the street even though they never knew who you were, simply because you saw them every day and you became familiar with them. Well, that's the same concept of listening to someone on a podcast or watching their video. So people buy from those they trust. One of the greatest lessons I've learned over the years is this. People rarely buy because of information alone. Information is everywhere. What people are really buying is confidence. Confidence that you understand their challenges. Confidence that you've helped others. Confidence that you can help them too. A podcast builds that confidence. Every episode answers another question, solves another problem, shares another story, demonstrates another lesson. Little by little, trust grows, and trust changes everything. By the time someone contacts you for coaching, registers for your course, hires you to speak, or purchases one of your programs, they often feel like they already know you. The sales conversation becomes easier because the relationship began long before they reached out. The power of the long-form contact. We live in a world filled with short attention spans, 30-second videos, 1-minute reels, quick social media updates. These certainly have value. They capture attention. They create awareness. But podcasts do something entirely different. They create depth. A 30-minute conversation allows listeners to understand how you think, how you solve a problem, what you believe, why you care, and that's where authority is built. Authority isn't created through clever slogans. It's created through meaningful conversations. Every episode becomes an asset. Every one of the things I love most about podcasting is that every episode continues working long after you've recorded it. Think about that for a moment. You might spend 1 hour preparing and recording an episode. Someone listens today. Another person discovers it 6 months from now. Someone else finds it 2 years later. That single episode continues introducing new people to your expertise. It's like having a salesperson working for you around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without taking a vacation. That's one of the reasons podcasting is such an incredible investment. You're not just creating content, you're creating long-term business assets. Podcasting supports your entire business. Here's another misconception. Many people think the goal of a podcast is to make money directly from the podcast. Sometimes it does. Advertising sponsorships, affiliate marketing, premium content. Those opportunities certainly exist, but the most successful entrepreneur understands something much bigger. The podcast isn't a business. The podcast grows the business. Your podcast introduces people to your expertise. It builds relationships. It establishes credibility. Then listeners become clients, students, coaching members, consulting clients, mastermind participants, event attendees, book buyers. The podcast becomes the front door to your entire business ecosystem. The ripple effect of one episode. Let's imagine you record one 30-minute podcast. That's only the beginning. From the one recording, you can create a YouTube video, a blog article, an email newsletter, 5 or 10 social media posts, several short video clips, inspirational quotes, a LinkedIn article, a downloadable checklist, even the foundation for a future keynote presentation. One idea, multiple platforms, multiple audiences, multiple opportunities. That's why I encourage entrepreneurs to think beyond simply recording episodes. Think about building an entire ecosystem. Why every entrepreneur should consider podcasting. Whether you're a coach, a consultant, a speaker, a nonprofit leader, a financial professional, a healthcare expert, or a small business owner, podcasting offers something very few marketing tools can provide: the opportunity to build relationships at scale. People don't simply hear your message, they hear your passion, your personality, your perspective, your values. These qualities are different to communicate in a social media post, but they're easy to communicate through your voice. And in today's competitive marketplace, relationships are still your greatest competitive advantage. Podcasting transforms how entrepreneurs build authority. So we're looking ahead. But then something happened that accelerated everything we just talked about. The COVID-19 pandemic forced business speakers, educators, and organizations around the world to rethink how they connected with people. Some struggled, others adapted, and those who had already invested in digital platforms, including podcasts, found themselves in a position they never expected. And this is something that is so important to understand: how the pandemic changed business, whether it was speaking an authority forever. We've talked about how the internet changed business and how podcasting became one of the most powerful authority building tools available. In early 2020, something happened that no one saw coming. The world stopped almost all overnight. Conferences were canceled. Trade shows disappeared. Corporate meetings were postponed indefinitely. Training sessions moved online. Airports became quiet. Hotel ballrooms sat empty. For professional speakers, trainers, and consultants, and event organizers, it was one of the most challenging periods in the history of the industry. Many people wondered if live speaking would ever return. And here's what fascinated me: the pandemic didn't create new trends, it accelerated trends that were already happening. When the stage went dark, imagine a professional speaker who your calendar is filled with keynote presentations. You're traveling every week. Your business depends on standing in front of live audiences. Then suddenly, every event on your calendar canceled. Phone calls start coming in. Unfortunately, we've decided to postpone. We're canceling this year's conference. We'll let you know when we're able to reschedule one after another. For some speakers, an entire year's worth of income disappeared in just a few weeks. It wasn't because they lacked talent. It wasn't because they weren't in demand. The environment had changed overnight, and they had to make a decision. Wait for things to return to normal or adapt. So here's the two different responses. What happened next revealed something important. Some people chose to wait. They believed everything would return to the way it had always been. Others saw something different. They recognized that while physical stages had disappeared, digital stages were expanding. They began learning virtual presentation skills. They invested in better cameras and microphones. They created webinars. They launched podcasts. They offered online workshops. They developed digital courses. They built membership communities. Instead of asking, when will conferences come back? They asked, how can I continue serving people today? That single mindset shift made all the difference. And because I grew up with a disability and had to think differently, that was something that I started working on and building up for the last 6 years. The businesses that thrived, one of the biggest lessons from the pandemic was that businesses with multiple ways to serve customers were far more resilient. If all of your income came from one source, you were vulnerable. But if you diversify your business, speaking, coaching, online courses, consulting, books, podcasting, memberships, digital products, affiliate partnerships, you had options. That's an important lesson for every entrepreneur. Multiple income streams don't just increase revenue, they increase stability. When one opportunity slows down, another one continues growing. Think of your business like a table with one leg falls over easily. A table with several strong legs remains stable. Your business should be built the same way. So owning your audience. Perhaps the biggest lesson from this period was the importance of owning your audience. Years ago, many entrepreneurs depended almost entirely on conferences or networking events to meet new clients. When those events disappeared, so did their ability to guarantee and generate leads. But entrepreneurs who had built email lists, podcast audiences, YouTube subscribers, online communities, and social media following could continue communicating with people every single week. And that's why I often say your audience is one of your most valuable business assets, not your office, not your equipment, not even your website, your audience, because when people know you, they trust you and choose to stay connected with you. Opportunities continue to emerge regardless of what's happening in the economy. Now, here's the importance of understanding the rise of virtual speaking. And it's also been a way for these virtual online meetings to change how you got paid as a speaker. So before 2020, many organizations viewed virtual presentations as second best. If possible, they preferred in-person events. Then necessity changed perception. Businesses realized they could bring together people from around the world without travel costs. Associations could increase attendance. Companies could record presentations for future training. Employees working remotely could participate from anywhere. Virtual speaking became more than a temporary solution. It became another valuable way to educate and inspire audiences. Today, many speakers offer both in-person and virtual presentations. not because one replaced the other, because each offers unique advantage. The lesson: the most successful entrepreneurs stay flexible. They don't resist change. They learn to leverage it. Now, here's a personal challenge for you. I'd like to ask you a question. If your primary way of attracting clients disappeared tomorrow, would your business continue growing? Think about that. If one marketing strategy stopped working, if one platform changed its algorithms, if one referral source dried up, would you still have ways to reach people? This isn't meant to encourage preparation. The strongest businesses are adaptable. They continually learn, they continually motivate, and they continually invest in building relationships across multiple platforms. The future belongs to those who can adapt. One thing I've learned throughout my career is that success doesn't belong exclusively to the smartest entrepreneur. It doesn't belong only to the person with the biggest budget or the largest team. Success often belongs to the person who is willing to learn, adjust, and keep moving forward. Not because those people predicted the future perfectly, but because they were willing to embrace change while others resisted it. Their mindset is becoming even more important today because we're now entering another extraordinary period of transformation. Artificial intelligence, automation, content creation, personal branding, digital communities. The business landscape is continually evolving, and entrepreneurs who position themselves as trusted authorities will have tremendous opportunities in the years ahead. So let's look ahead. So, where does all this lead? It leads to what I call the creator authority era, and the era where every entrepreneur has the opportunity to build influence without waiting for permission. An era where your knowledge can become one of the greatest business assets. An era where the combination of speaking, podcasting, content creation, and technology allows ordinary people to create extraordinary impact. Now, what I want to say about this is it's very important because I grew up in an era when people with disabilities were basically locked out of everything. And I had to make my own opportunities. That's why I became an early adapter to technology. That's why when I started my podcast, it was in the very early stages of podcasting when it wasn't even coined. The term podcast hadn't even been coined yet. So let's look at, and I want to welcome you to the creator authority era. As we've traveled through the history of professional speaking, we've seen an incredible evolution. We started in 1973 with the formation of the National Speakers Association. We talk about the era when publishing a book was almost a requirement if you wanted to be considered an expert. We explored how the internet removed many of the traditional gatekeepers, how podcasting transformed authority building, and how the pandemic accelerated digital business. All of these changed and have led to where we are today, the creator authority era. And I truly believe if it's one of the most exciting times in history to be an entrepreneur. Why? Because for the first time, you don't have to wait for someone else to choose you. You can choose yourself. And authority has been decentralized. Think about the statement for a moment. For decades, someone else decided whether your voice deserved to be heard. A publisher decided whether your book would be published. A television producer decided whether you'd appear on a program. A conference organizer decided whether you'd speak on stage. A newspaper editor decided whether your story would be featured. Today, you can press record on your phone, publish a podcast, go live on social media, upload a YouTube video, write a LinkedIn article, host a webinar, launch a newsletter, create a course, open an online community. You don't need permission. You need consistently. That's one of the greatest business opportunities because your knowledge is an asset. Many entrepreneurs underestimate the value of what they know. They assume everyone knows what they know. Let me assure you, they don't. If you've spent years working in your profession, if you've overcome obstacles, if you've developed systems that produce results, you possess knowledge someone else is willing to learn. The question isn't whether you have an expertise. The question is whether you're sharing it every day. People search online looking for answers. They're asking questions you already know how to answer. They're struggling with problems you've probably already solved. They're looking for someone who can help them move forward. Why should that person be you? Now, let's talk about how visibility creates opportunity. One of my favorite sayings is this: opportunities flow to people who are visible. Think about the opportunity you've had in your own career. Most of them probably began because someone knew your name, someone heard you speak, someone read your article that you wrote, someone received a referral, someone listened to your podcast. Visibility creates familiarity, and familiarity creates trust. Trust creates opportunity. That's why consistently showing up matters so much. Not because every episode will generate thousands of downloads, but because consistently compounds. Imagine publishing one podcast every week. That's 52 episodes every year. Over 5 years, you've built a library of more than 250 conversations introducing people in your expertise, and that's an incredible business asset. And to this day, I've probably produced over 1,000 podcasts because I started in 2020. Excuse me, I started in 2006, and this is 2026. So that's 20 years, and I pretty much did it weekly. So if you figure 52 times 20, that's over 1,000 podcasts. The role of artificial intelligence, and this is very important because so many people just don't understand how they can use artificial intelligence to make their business and everything much easier and quicker. And what used to take hours to do can easily be broken down into minutes. Now, let's talk about something that's transforming entrepreneurship right now. Artificial intelligence. Some people are excited, others are nervous. Personally, I see AI as one of the greatest productivity tools entrepreneurs have ever had. Notice I said tool, not replacement. A tool. AI can help you brainstorm ideas, online presentations, organize research, draft articles, generate social media ideas, repurpose podcast episodes, analyze data, save time, and here's what AI cannot replace: your life experiences, your personal stories, your values, your relationships, your unique perspective. Technology can accelerate your productivity. It cannot duplicate your humanity. That's why your authentic voice is becoming more valuable, not less valuable. And it also helps you to build an ecosystem, not just a business. And that's what makes it so important. One of the biggest mindset shifts I encourage entrepreneurs to make is this. Stop thinking about individual products. Start thinking about an ecosystem. Imagine someone discovering your podcast. From there, they download your free guide. They join your email list. Later, they attend a webinar. Eventually, they enroll in your course. After completing your course, they join your mastermind. Later, they hire you as a coach. Eventually, they invite you to speak at their conference. That's not 6 unrelated activities. That's one connected customer journey. Everything supports everything else. Your podcast feeds your email list. Your email list promotes your webinars. Your webinars introduce your coaching. Your coaching leads to speaking opportunities. Your speaking generates more podcast listeners. Your business becomes a complete ecosystem. That's exactly how sustainable authority is built. So, the entrepreneurs who will thrive. So who will succeed during the next decade? It won't necessarily be those with the biggest budgets or the fanciest websites or the most followers. It will be the entrepreneur who consistently educates, consistently serves, consistently solve problems, consistently build trust. People don't follow perfection. They follow authenticity. They follow generosity. They follow consistency. If you continue showing up with genuine desire, help others succeed, you'll separate yourself from much of the competition. Now, here are the 5 characteristics of modern authority. Number 1, clarity. They solve exactly who they serve and what problem they solve. Number 2, consistency. They show up regularly, even when results aren't immediately. Number 3, credibility. They back up their message with experience, education, and real outcomes. Number 4, connection. They build relationships instead of simply collecting followers. And number 5, contribution. They focus on creating value before asking for anything in return. Those 5 qualities are available to every entrepreneur listening today, not because of where you started, but because of what you chose to do consistently. Now, what I'm going to do is this, is talk about some of the things that can help you create valuable content every week. And I didn't say every day. I said every week. 1 podcast episode, 1 article, 1 educational video, 1 webinar, 1 presentation, 1 piece of meaningful content each week. Adds up quickly. After 1 year, you'll have over 50 pieces of valuable content. After 5 years, you'll have hundreds. Imagine someone discovering your work 5 years from now. Instead of finding one article, they discover an entire library of ideas. That's authority. And it's important for you to understand how to now measure progress, not perfection. One of the biggest reasons people quit is because they expect immediate results. Authority doesn't work that well. It's built gradually. Instead of asking, did I become famous this month? Ask better questions. Did I publish consistently? Did I help people? Did I improve my potential presentation skills? Did I grow my email list? Did I make new connections did I continue showing up? Those are the questions that build successful businesses. Progress compounds. Now, let's look at it this way. If today's episode inspired you to begin building your authority, I'd love to help you take the next step. At Career Performance Institute, we've developed practical training programs specifically for entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, speakers, authors, nonprofit leaders, and business professionals who want to increase their visibility, build credibility, and create sustainable income. Whether you're looking to launch your first podcast, become a sought after speaker, develop online courses, or create a complete authority-based business, we have the resources designed to help you succeed. Our Amplify Your Authority training provides a step-by-step roadmap for building your personal brand. The Speaker Kit helps you create professional presentations, media materials, and speaking opportunities. The Podcast Kit walks you through launching, growing, and monetizing a successful podcast. And our Visibility Bundle combines everything you need into one complete system to establishing yourself as a trusted expert in your field. I encourage you to visit Career Performance Institute, explore the resources, and choose your path that aligns with your goals. Because here's what I know to be true. Someone somewhere is waiting for the knowledge you already possess. The question isn't whether you're ready. The question is whether you're willing to begin. Remember, the world doesn't need another copy of someone else. They need your voice. It needs your experience, and it needs your story. And you can go to coach.davidashensky.com. So thank you for joining me on Breakthrough to Business Success. I hope today's episode was valuable insights, practical strategies, and inspiration can help you move one step closer to your goals. Remember, every successful business begins with a decision to take action and stay committed to the journey. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with fellow entrepreneurs who are ready to build, grow, and scale their business. For additional resources, training programs, coaching opportunities, and tools to help you accelerate your success, connect with us at Career Performance Institute. Now, until next time, keep believing in your vision, keep taking action. I'm Davida Shensky, and this has been Breakthrough to Business Success, where every entrepreneur's turn challenges and changes opportunities and ideas into results. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. So,